Perspectives here on Rise News. Now to that delightful time when we get to know more about our guests, starting with Vanessa Agili, popularly known as Chef V, a leading private chef in Nigeria and founder of Cole Cooks Limited, curating bespoke dining experiences worldwide. She celebrates Nigerian and West African ingredients with an international flair. Trained at Chef Academy London and Michelin-starred Bibedom, Chef V is also the creator of Setting the Standard and co-hosts the podcast One Bite at a Time. We are also being joined by Benedict Okuzu, a Lagos-based chef and the creative director of Chef Benedict Culinary Experience, specializing in Italian cuisine with local ingredients. Trained in Florence and Bologna, Chef Ben has worked in top Italian kitchens and now consults for leading restaurants in Lagos, offering expertise in menu development and kitchen management. Last but certainly not the least is Banke Makinde, a food entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in lifestyle and hospitality. Since Banke launched 3x4 Foods with street food outlets and catering services, she has been instrumental in executing landmark projects, promoting hundreds of top restaurants across the country. These initiatives have garnered endorsements and sponsorship from leading global brands. Guys, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to Perspectives. Let me start with you, Banke. Please, what's the difference between chef and food entrepreneur? Because to me, it sounds like the same thing.
They're very similar, but also very different. A food entrepreneur doesn't necessarily cook, so I'm not a trained chef. These beautiful people are. I just enjoy food. I know about food, I know how to market food, I love to eat food, and I have a basic understanding of food, so I am in the business of food, and yeah, so that's a major difference.
But to a certain extent, what are the tools that you need to be a good food entrepreneur? Because you have to know quite a bit about it before you work with chefs who have to now make their presentations.
Oh, most definitely. I have a very big knowledge of food, just because I'm not trained how to train. I'm not trained on how to make it, but I'm definitely well versed in food. I've eaten in all sorts of different places. I have a basic knowledge of food, and I have a passion for food and, you know, the making of it and how you make money from it. So yeah, that's
most important.
That's the important part.
Most important. Okay, let's get to you, Vanessa. What inspired you to become a chef, and how do you begin your journey? How did you begin your journey? Have you translated your knowledge incorporated into the Nigerian market?
It's been quite a fascinating journey. I think you know me before I even became a chef. It's not always
you were in
been
fashion,
exactly.
as far away from cooking as possible.
I worked in fashion, I was in project management. I've always been behind the camera doing more of the entrepreneurial side of the business. But it's all creative in my eye, and I've always had a fascination for food. I grew up in a home that food was an expression of love, it was an expression of celebration. And it was during the COVID lockdown that when I really looked into myself and saw that this was something that I could fully take on professionally. I was cooking 3 times a day. My family depended on my meals. And I've always had a natural flair for cooking. It's not been difficult for me, but I've always been fascinated by how I could work with different ingredients through my travel inspirations, my influences from around the world. And that caused me to now go into culinary school once the lockdown had opened back up.
Okay.
And I came back to Nigeria and I wanted to start making money. I've always been entrepreneurial. So I launched Cole Cooks, and it was an accident that ended up becoming such a prominent career for me. And that's where we are now.
Interesting. Okay, what about you, Ben? Because I know that you have an Italian tilt to your cooking, and how have you been able to incorporate these regional flavors into your cooking, into Nigerian dishes?
It's been an interesting journey, I must say. What we do is we decided to look at how we could best celebrate Nigerian locally sourced ingredients. And I want people to understand that our local ingredients can stand up to the global standard of ingredients. The truth is, I think our ingredients just need a lot more appreciation. So through the medium of Italian cuisine, we've tried to appreciate as much as possible our local ingredients. It's been interesting because what I found is I wouldn't change where I'm at right now. I love Nigeria, I love Lagos, I love how our ingredients are actually unexplored. It's been fun for me. It's been a whole journey of rediscovery. So yes.
So you do a lot of experimenting.
Yeah, yes. Let's call it experimenting. It's a very calculated experiment. It's more of a hypothesis, So the Italians have a saying: "Tutto il mondo è paese," the whole world's a town. And the truth is that you have tomatoes in Italy, you have tomatoes in Nigeria. What we focus on is we take the tomatoes that we have here and try and best see how to best work them. Like, what is it that shines about it, and try to bring that out.
Okay. But for you, Vanessa, let me ask, what are some unique Nigerian ingredients or spices that you love to use? And how do you balance traditional cooking with modern culinary techniques?
I like to work with all, but I think I have to just move from what Ben has said. We're both international chefs who were trained internationally. We came back to Nigeria. And I think what has inspired us is that clients would come here and expect us to work with imported ingredients, to work with things that maybe look from the outside eye to be more interesting, more professional, more culinary innovative. But what I found coming into Nigeria was that we need to explore our ingredients. We need to showcase that our ingredients can be used in a fine dining, elevated method. So that's what I came back to do. I specialize in comfort food. So I like to look at how we can make our ingredients and our flavors a bit more comforting, a bit more warm. And I think Nigerian food already has that element. So I take inspiration from our ingredients such as, let's say, egusi, okra soup, but I'll take that ingredients that we're so very much focused on as a dish rather than the core ingredients. And I'll try and showcase its versatility and how beautiful that ingredient can be transformed into something completely new. So my aim is to show clients that we don't need to be stuck in our ways of using these ingredients in the same way. We don't have to be so repetitive, but we can showcase that these ingredients have just as much versatility as anything else in the world.
Okay, talking of versatility, because I have to ask a three question in there. What is the most unconventional mix that you have done that have actually stunned your clients when it came to the taste? Because I remember I went to some bar in England, some restaurants in England, and there were some things they came out with, and when they told me what it was, I was like, I don't know, how did you come about? It was just totally far removed from what it normally was served as. So in terms of that, for both of you, what are the exciting things that you've done that have surprised people in terms of mixture? If
I had to pick one, I'll pick something that I've recently innovated, and that would have to be my egusi puree, which I believe you'll all be tasting later today. Egusi is a seed, it's a melon seed, and we typically in Nigeria ground it to then make a soup. What I've done is I've created a creamy puree made with some squash, coconut milk, fresh yogurt. It's pureed in there with some nice spices, and it's just turned out to be this beautifully creamy, smooth puree that you can accompany with anything. I use it for toppings with my proteins. I use it as a dip with bread. I use it to top vegetables that are roasted.
Oh, that's interesting. I hope you brought it here.
Yes,
because I'd like
you'll
to taste
be tasting it later today.
That would be nice to taste. Okay, let me ask you, Banke, in terms of workspace, what's a typical day like for you in the kitchen, and how do you ensure quality and consistency in your dishes, especially during working hours?
So 3x4 Foods is a food company that has many different expressions, and one of them is quick service, another one is catering. We do event organization as well, so there's so many elements to moving parts to the company. And one of the major things because my background is in engineering, so structure is very important to me. And so when it comes to just the human resources of running a company, a food company, you need to make sure that there's a lot of structure. So from making sure that all the members of our team are very well versed in their roles, in their responsibilities, having things like charts and menus everywhere and checklists, and making sure that they're very well defined SOPs and standard operating procedures really helps coordinate a kitchen and just running everything and just literally making sure that you're working with professionals. And training is so very important. I was
going to even ask, because the kitchen, I liken it to the backstage of a fashion show. That's an absolute chaos. So how do you manage the chefs? Because I know that even with designers too, I don't know why I keep relating it, because they're all still a form of art. With designers, sometimes when you tell a designer something is not quite sitting right, they get very offended because they think it's their art that you're criticizing. So in your case, how do you deal with a chef's ego? How do you manage? Also, because I'm sure it exists. Yeah. How do you manage tension in a high-paced atmosphere?
I mean, the chefs are creatives. You're all creatives, and creators hold on to their baby for dear life. But the good thing about it is I feel like a lot of the people I've worked with are teachable. because, not everybody knows everything, and you're in a space where things change so often, and people like to experiment and try new things. So I find that chefs do take to understanding that different people have different tastes, and okay, this might not be yours, but this is what I was trying to achieve. So cooking is emotional.
Anything creative is emotional.
Yeah. So you find that they can take things on board. They know how they mean it to be and how people perceive it.
Don't give us these answers. Have you had situations where you've had to stop using a chef?
Oh, most definitely. But that is
what are the reasons things like that happen?
That's not because of their ego, that's because of their lack of professionalism.
Okay, so when you say lack of, what do you mean by that?
If they're not properly trained, they don't know how to run a kitchen. And for me, because again, I'm not the chef, I'm not the professional, I say it's your kitchen. You run the kitchen, I'm just on the back end to support you in anything that you're doing in terms of the business. And because I know they are very territorial of their food, of their space, so I let them run their kitchen and all the different parts of the kitchen that there can be. So if you don't know how to properly organize people, work with people, make sure you maintain good food safety standards and things like that, then I can't work with you on that basis. And so, yeah.
I think what we have to understand when we've both worked in kitchens and professional kitchens at that before we opened our own businesses, just as much as the kitchen is a very creative space, it's also extremely organizational, and we run on routine, we run on hierarchy.
I'm sure timing too.
Exactly. There's something called a brigade that we work with in a kitchen, and it's a French system, and there is nothing without a hierarchy. We have the executive chef, the head chef, a head sous chef, chef de partie, and then the line chefs.
So there are actually hierarchies.
And we have to make sure, it's very military, but we have to make sure that every person knows exactly who they are, where they work, what they're contributing to the end goal. So if you were to allow everyone to work as a creative and say, you shine and you try and show off, the kitchen would not work.
Okay, we're going on the break soon. So we're going on the break soon. So we'll be right back with our young chefs and food entrepreneur. So don't go anywhere. See you soon. Welcome back to Perspectives. Now, Vanessa, you were talking about different hierarchies. I mean, people just see chefs come out and serve. Nobody really knows what goes on back door. But please, how many stages are there, or how many?
So as I mentioned, you have the executive chef, who may be the owner of the restaurant, who heads the menu, creates the menu. You have a head chef under the executive chef, who will do the day-to-day running of the kitchen. You have the sous chef, who assists the head chef. Then you have the chef de partie, who is the head of each station. You might have up to 6 stations in a kitchen. Wow. Then you have the line chefs, which are the chefs that do the normal cooking of orders. Okay.
Yes. But Ben, you were saying that there's a difference between the chefs we have here and abroad.
Yes, so I would say that locally and abroad, in terms of our philosophies towards how we approach food for crowds are different. So I would say here, more than anything, is the execution of staples. So, I want to be known for amala. So already the structure behind that is more you are in support of whoever is creating the food. So you don't have very clear roles. It's like people are cooking, some people are cleaning, okay, chop the onions, this. Instead, when you're abroad, there is a philosophy that is required. There is a culinary direction, and that's something that's very key. Culinary direction is the philosophy and the direction that the executive chef has set in terms of the experience that he wants to give to the client. That philosophy, everything is built in to follow a certain direction that can execute that in the best way possible. So even your kitchen is structured around that. So what you now need to do is that each person that's in different roles has to execute based on that philosophy. So now what now happens is that everybody within the system has a very clear role to try and push that the philosophy to actually thrive.
I have to add to that quickly, because as he mentioned, this philosophy has been created at the beginning of the restaurant conception. And the restaurant industry is very new here, but what I've seen coming in is that a lot of the restaurant owners have come up with a concept, but they may not necessarily be professionals in the food industry. So they've come up with a concept, they have the mood of the restaurant, they've created the whole restaurant outlook, the layout and everything. And then once it's time to open, that's when they will now consult to bring in a team.
Yes.
And like I mentioned, an executive chef should be there from the conception stage, and the hierarchy and the philosophy of the kitchen should be part of the building of the restaurant. But here it's an afterthought, and that's why sometimes
you have to structure the kitchen to be able to deliver
exactly.
what you're trying to offer.
So here we have kitchens that are trying to meet up to what the restaurant is saying they are, rather than a kitchen and a restaurant that has come together as a synergized movement.
Okay, is that so? Do you have any situations where things like that have happened during your course of?
Because I have the opportunity to work with different kinds of chefs, particularly local, because my brand focuses on local, authentic African food. Okay. So Nigerians and how we cook is very different from, cooking in a professional kitchen is very different from cooking at home. And you find that a lot of the local dishes and the things are made up people who are good home cooks. And the transition from a home cook to a professional commercial kitchen is very, very different. So unless you have the adequate training, you can't really make that distinction, especially in that kind of space. But it's the people who make the local food sometimes that's the sweetest. So you kind of have to balance with training them on how to make that transition and how everything kind of just comes together. But you find that people just love food, and when they have that love for the food, they find a way to kind of make it work. But again, I still stand on training. Training is a key part of how you kind of bring these aspects together to make everything work.
Okay, but I wanted to ask, like we were saying earlier on before we came on air, about how wasteful Nigerians are when it comes to food. Do you understand? And, so what ways have chefs or yourself how have you found a balance in ensuring that even though you want to give your customers the ultimate pleasure, have you also found a way to minimize wastage?
I can begin. One thing I like to do is when I'm creating a menu, I try and look at how an ingredient can be used in multiple dishes. For example, I'll give you, if you go to a restaurant and you see maybe 50 items on a menu, you're folding and turning pages and you just see so many options. Most times you might see one ingredient is only used for one dish. That causes a lot of waste because you're not able to fully utilize that ingredient. So I believe in the philosophy of making sure that your ingredients can be used in a variety of ways. Also, to reduce waste, I try and use the ingredients in its wholeness. I will use the skin, I will use the seed, I will use the flesh. If I'm using the protein, I will use the bones and make a stock out of it. Once I have the skin maybe from the chicken, let's say, I will dry that skin and make a salt. So it's also about showing that the ingredient should not just be thrown away. You have to find ways to make sure you use all of it. And it's something that's been part of our philosophy as Africans. If you look back historically, we never wasted an animal, we never wasted a vegetable because we don't believe in waste. So why would we take that into the restaurant industry and start wasting?
Yeah, but do you also think, because I think those small portions that they do nowadays, I find that much more interesting because if you like it, then you can order 2 or 3 more. And if you don't really like it, then you can discard it. So what's your take? How popular do you think the small portions being served are today?
I think it goes into what I was saying before about philosophy, right? So I think narrative storytelling also kind of breaks down the barrier of what we're used to culturally. So I think, well, when I say culture, I think I'm also wrong there. I'll correct myself. I think in modern times, abundance is what we look for. It's a thing where we want to see plenty.
Yeah, but you can see plenty in different dishes or plenty in terms of variety, as opposed to one meal that is like a mountain on your table.
Well, that's the point. The plenty is mine individually, right? So it's like, my plate is full. It's not about the community having everything. It's my own is full. Now we get plates past everybody.
Yes.
So that's the idea. So I think what it is, at least in my own experience, what I've tried to do is playing on flavors. Yes. So it's like, okay, we're going to give you something that is highly experiential. And you need to focus on this, because if you not have too much going on, you're not going to appreciate the experience. The thing is that obviously there's having to get past that barrier of trying to get people to understand that. So it's a thing where narrative and storytelling now comes into play.
I was just going to ask about that, because I've been to one experience where there was so much elaboration, so much storytelling, so much. So do you put that into cognizance when you're serving, or when you have small soirees that you're attending to? Do you actually create a story around why you came up with this dish, blah blah blah?
Very much so.
And if so, give us one or two experiences.
Very much so. I think when it comes to the art of food, it's very important showcase where you got your inspiration from, and it takes your clients on a journey of seeing and appreciating the food past I'm trying to eat because I'm hungry. It's more so I want to experience this to enjoy and feel the flavors that you have just described. And through that comes, for me, I'm a lot more, I like to tell a story through my words. I will take you through a journey of how I got my inspirations. You'll find some other chefs that want to bring in the theatrics of, smoke and fires.
Yes.
And that I agree to some degree. I think a lot of that is interesting for a client, but I'm still a very passionate chef about the flavor.
Give us, okay, would you give us an example because we're going to get some dishes coming later. So you do one of your storytelling.
Of course, I'll be happy to.
Exercises. So, Banke, can you tell us a memorable experience or accomplishments in your career?
Oof, where do I begin?
Or one of the most poignant ones.
I would say, I think it's just getting people to try things. As they've both said, we come from a culture of abundance, and Nigerians, when we like things, we like them a very particular way. And the thing about my brand is, when I'm serving food, I don't say that we're serving food, I say we're creating an experience. And I'm saying I'm trying to export the experience of Nigerian culture through food. So I try and give you still the same authentic African food, but I'm just changing the format a little bit. So I'm serving things that people recognize and people love and people know, like ewa going, like akara. But
I remember the ewa going you served, and the bread was so tiny. I mean, you could finish it in 2 bites.
Exactly. So it's just ewa going as a sandwich. So what I've done is I've taken something that's it's local. Everyone knows it. I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm just changing how it's served. And getting people to understand that is very tricky. Nigerians, they're like, which one is sandwich? Just give me my ewa, give me my bread. And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to give you bites, finger foods, bowl foods, canapes. A lot of the food that we do is normal Nigerian food that you will have. It's just how can we show people the beauty of our food in the presentation of our food, making it translatable to other people, other cultures, so that they can enjoy it for what it is. And so I'm always very happy when, I always say we always experience 2 things when people experience our brand, which is, number one, people saying, what's this one? And then they eat it, and you can see on their face that sense of like, oh, okay, I know what that is. I'm familiar with it. So there's that familiarity. Or there's something like, oh, I know what that is, and then they taste it, and it's different. So I would definitely say getting people to actually try something new and loving it for what it is for me is
anyway,
key part
we're going to break yet again, and then this time round we're going to have some of your dishes. And you better show me some theatrical artistry that will make me want to look forward to it. So we're going to break soon. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. See you back in Perspectives. Anyway, welcome back to Perspectives. As you can see, we have some beautiful dishes displayed ahead of me. So, Benedict, let's start with you. What's this one, this bread that you have here?
It's a tomato bruschetta, so we use a locally sourced Nigerian baguette with local tomatoes, a little bit of basil, touch of olive oil, and our infused balsamic vinegar. The bread is local, the tomatoes are local, the basil is local.
Can we see this? Is it possible to get a close view at this? So this is safe for me to eat. I hope there's no onions.
There's no onions whatsoever. So the idea behind this is, once again, as I was saying, so a lot of people try to label us as
fusion. So let's taste it now.
Please taste.
Okay, so there it is.
A lot of people like to label us as fusion. We're not a fusion brand. We are exclusively Italian cuisine. But what we do is that we respect Nigerian ingredients, and our driving force is Nigerian ingredients.
It is very nice.
I think as a chef, 80% of cooking is really the quality of the ingredients you use. We are nothing more than just guides to try and bring out the best of what we have. So this is a good way to show that Nigerian ingredients can stand up to everything. I try to look at Nigeria from the ingredient point of view rather than the completed dish, which is something that I try to tell people to do. It's like, imagine if you have an accountant that doesn't know how to balance books or does not understand.
It's funny that you speak about ingredients. Because I wanted to ask, because I know that there's certain towns or certain places that, are good, or their crop is better than others.
Yes.
So for instance, now if you want to shop for your crops or your produce or the ingredients that you need, what are the specific places to look out for, and what do they have that makes them stand out from the other sellers?
I love to speak about Jos. Jos is up north in Nigeria, and the agriculture sector there has fantastically grown over the last couple of years. My salad here, which I bought to you
Okay, speaking
today,
of it, what do you have in your salad?
It's we have some local kale spinach.
Let's taste.
You have apples and beetroot. You also have a candied granite and some avocado. The dressing is a granite dressing as well. Everything in this salad is local, majority from Jos. So I get a lot of my fruits and my greens from Jos.
This is beautiful.
Thank you.
I think I can, the beetroot and the apple too.
Exactly. The
Also
beetroots
give
were
it an
roasted.
extra tinge.
Exactly.
Very fresh.
You know, a lot
Very
of the
fresh.
times we used to heavily rely on imported ingredients for salads. We think when it's time to be healthy or time to have salads in restaurants or cafes, I would see iceberg lettuce, I would see all the imported salmon and the, you know, all these different things that would make the salad so expensive. But to eat healthy, we should try and promote, you know, working with local ingredients, working with local farmers, local fruits. We have an abundance of vegetation here in Nigeria. So I really love to
But some would
highlight
argue that the international ones, international produce is better or tastes better than Nigerian produce.
how is this salad?
It's beautiful, but I have to ask, oxtail.
Yes.
Because I love oxtail, but they will charge you a separate price from
Yes,
imported
for
oxtail than the one. But why is that?
Because importing is expensive, and we just
No, but there's a difference in the taste as
yes,
well,
I mean
and
it's
texture.
it's the quality of the cow and the way the cow is raised internationally in other countries. Our cows go through they hike from the north down to the south. They're very hard. They're skinny. We don't have the same body when it comes to our
So,
species.
Yes,
if I
go
may
on.
add to this, so that's the thing, and
This
that's
is
what
lovely.
we've been trying to focus on, right? Every single kind of produce has its purpose. It's about figuring out its strengths. So it's like a thing where, for me, I feel like, okay, if you're trying to look at our ingredients from the eye of an international standard, in my opinion, it doesn't work that way. Food doesn't work that way, which is why you have different categories and different qualities. Norwegian salmon is not the same as Alaskan wild-caught salmon, which means that you use one for one and one for the other, right? So when you're talking about oxtail, yes, we have slightly less fat content. So what it is that you'd make a sauce that can compensate for that fat content.
I was just going to say, that can make it taste as good.
Yes, the truth is that what you have to do is like, so for example, our tomatoes in the bruschetta, our tomatoes are tart. So we do leave it, so while with Italian tomatoes, you dress a la minute, which means like you'd make it right there. With Nigerian tomatoes, you have to let them marinate slightly longer. You know, so it's little things like that, like we made a beef carpaccio. Our beef oxidizes much more quickly because it doesn't age and everything. So what do? You add the dressing slightly later. You cut it thinner because we also marinate our beef so that it sweats out a little bit of that Nigerian water. So you compensate, but you see, that's the thing about professional training.
Yeah.
That's these nuances and what to do with what you have comes from training and exposure.
To add to that as well, I think it's important to talk about intentionality with how we grow our vegetables, how we farm.
Yes.
We are still at a state where we're not capitalizing
As in-
off creating a specific type of ingredient. We're just growing. And if you look at international agriculture, they know the business behind it. They're exporting for international standards. We need to get to that point where we invest in our farmers and show through investing in either the technology behind making sure that every harvest you are creating the same quality. You can go to the market and see maybe 50 different types of Irish potato.
Yes.
Because we're not growing to a
How
standard.
do you think the government, what role do you think the government can play in ensuring that we achieve this aim or this aim?
Providing education and funding.
Firstly.
Education is the first thing. Rather than so, education will give people an idea of what is possible. And then what now happens is that you now create the environment and the structure around it. But education and exposure is the first thing.
Do we even have a culinary school here in Nigeria?
Well, we have several.
Yes.
We have
And are they good?
They're quite good. I mean, you know, there are different levels to them, but there are definitely quite a few that do training. But I think there's training in the culinary level and there's training just from the very basic level. Buying food in Nigeria sometimes is very scary because from just the storage of food sometimes they don't know. Again, they need education. You can't put strange things into the food and chemicals that people are going to consume. You can't put them into things that people are going to consume. So they need to be taught that, yes, we know you're trying to conserve your crop or your food for extending the life so you can sell it to customers, but these are things that people consume that can't just be washed away. And so it's very, very important to let them understand that, you know, keeping the food, from processing the food, storing the food, you have to be very, very delicate with it, and it's not something that you play with. And definitely,
it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I know that they do that with oranges and especially fruits. I don't know what do they even inject in them that make them change color?
GMO chemicals to make sure that they're more orange or they're bigger. You know, they do that all around the world. And
I was just going to say, it's not just even in China.
Exactly.
They do it all over the world.
It's a global issue, and sometimes I do think because we're still in our, let's say, pilgrim stage of farming, we are in a better place. We know that our produce is not necessarily being injected with things. At the same time, you mentioned, is there training in the culinary industry? I want to look at, when we say what the government can do, training agricultural farmers. A lot of the farmers in Nigeria, they are independent, they are very small, they farm to feed themselves. And if we're able to fund systems where you train farmers to grow to a certain level, you showcase the regulations, how to ensure that what they're producing is of good crop, and how to harvest safely, especially with meat produce, I would say, the butchering part of things. A lot of people are butchering the meats, and maybe it's not being done in the safe way. So that's why sometimes you look at how we boil our meat all the way down, because we're trying to kill all the different organisms that have grown inside, because it wasn't butchered properly. And internationally, you can eat a steak rare because you know that.
But that's not something that Nigerians really do.
No, and that's why I say it's something.
Raw meat is not something we really embrace.
But it's going back to, and this is something, I'm sorry I keep on touching on this, but it comes once again to how culturally we tie. So, and this is something I'm really trying. So I had a dinner yesterday, and I was really trying to move away from this. If we don't start looking at our ingredients as our ingredients rather than a tool for a dish. So ugu is grown according to the fact that we're going to use ugu as we'll slice it and put it inside the soup. Ugu is a vegetable that stands on its own. It's a beautiful green. So the thing is that you want to grow it into something that you can make versatile. I want my ugu to look nice and crisp.
So what have you done with ugu?
I've done different things with ugu, actually.
Give us examples of unconventional things you've done.
We made a linguine, so a pasta sauce where we'd use blended ugu, anchovies, and lemon zest with a touch of parmesan.
That sounds interesting.
So, and as I said, it's ingredients. So it's a thing where I liken ugu to an Italian green called cavolo nero, because in terms of flavor profile, they're the same. So I made a recipe with ugu that's similar to that, trying to use some of the, I wanted to use the bitterness that ugu has. Also, ugu is actually quite creamy when you blend it, so there's a texture that it gives sauces. So that's what I'm trying to say, like, if we start growing in terms of, okay, these are the qualities that this ingredient has, so I'm going to provide the best environment so that these qualities shine, rather than, it doesn't matter, I just go and pluck ugu because it's just, it's an addition to something. The respect that you have towards it is not the same.
And that's how you'll get ugu to be exported out into
Seeing
it on the shelves in America.
But do you even think we do enough in terms of exporting our products?
We don't.
No.
And like we said, I think it comes to really understanding and appreciating the ingredient for what it is and ensuring that it's being produced to the best quality. It's not about the dish. And I think I can use this opportunity to explain my second dish here, which I have.
Okay, this is the...
This is the slow braised beef short rib, again made with locally sourced beef.
So what's this yellow?
So the yellow sauce is the egusi puree that I was talking about earlier.
Egusi puree?
Yes. And it's toasted with a bit of palm oil, so you'll get that taste in the back. But it's been blended with some locally grown squash as well. I've also used okra here.
Is this your colorful display?
I'm explaining. So I fell in love with using okra because what we do here, we like to slice it thinly, we like to blend it to make a soup.
But it tastes so different.
It's crunchy, it's not slimy. It's been flash grilled, it's been cut thickly, so you don't get the slimy activation.
Oh my
So I'm
goodness.
showcasing the okra as the ingredient here. Even the egusi puree, I've just recently come from Brazil and I was absolutely inspired by a dish there that's called moqueca.
But there's a sweetish tinge to it. It's almost as if you put honey.
A little bit honey squash.
I was just wondering.
And in Brazil, they like to work with making palm oil creamy. So they like to infuse coconut milk with that palm oil, and you no longer have that. You know, sometimes when you eat a palm oil soup, it's got that sticky feeling, that heaviness. I've turned it into something quite light. And then the slow braised beef here, I use the technique of the firewood jollof, of smoking the jus to get that charcoal taste at the back of your mouth.
Okay, so this is beef that we're looking at here.
So our firewood technique, in any other international eye. Smoking is a Michelin level technique. And one thing I like to showcase is that we have fine dining techniques. We have techniques that we can really showcase in an international eye as something to be proud of. We don't need to look at France or Italy and say we must do what they're doing to make to be just as good.
I can't get over the paste. This is egusi.
It's egusi.
It's just using our ingredients in different ways.
Oh my
We're
goodness.
so much stuck on being a dish, and that's what we're trying to say. We have a plethora of ingredients that can be transformed.
We're going for our last break, and when we come back, we'll finalize on all of this, but I am so impressed. Sorry that I'm eating. I'll see you right back soon. Welcome back to Perspectives. This is your egusi thing. I can't get over it. But is this one of your signature dishes?
It is one of my creations.
But Benedict, you also have a signature dish that people.
I have a few signature dishes. So our tomato bruschetta is an iconic thing that we started doing. The use of like Nigerian tomatoes to make something that's very light and flavorful. I think the thing that's always very shocking is the simplicity of what we do, and the amount of flavor we are able to get from that level of simplicity.
Okay. But Banke, when it comes to plating, I mean, this is also nice and decorative and what have you. But how do you now find the balance between the presentation and the flavor? Because some of them might look that good and they don't really taste that well. So how do you manage to find a balance when you want to make your own presentations?
What we do is, again, we serve the things that are already very well known, very well liked. We just try and find a different way to give it to you. So I'll take the sandwich, the common sandwich. I think every nation or everywhere in the world has their own version of a sandwich. And then when we started looking inwards in Nigeria, I said, what is our version? And we looked at just common street food and how people already take agege bread and they dip it in beans or they eat it with akara. And I was like, you know what, I think that's kind of our version of a sandwich. So how can we present this to the people? And that's how we kind of developed the brand from there, because we took something that people already have every day, and we just give it to them in a different format that looks beautiful.
Yes. What I want to also ask, when you're working with chefs, are you the one that decides how it should be displayed?
It's a bit of both. Again,
but what if the chef has a particular way they want to present it, and you don't necessarily agree with that, and you think it would be a better marketing gimmick if it's presented the way you want it? How do you find the balance?
We work with a philosophy, and so as long as they follow the philosophy, which is, again, authentic African food and ingredients, they are free to do what they please.
So they are free to display it whichever way they feel, even if you don't think that's the best way to display it?
Chef knows best.
Okay, good. No, it's good to draw those lines so that there's no... it's good. Oh my God, they just showed something, the plantain one. Was it you that made that?
No.
Okay.
Yes, that was a plantain rosette on ewa going. So again, still normally, it's just how it's being presented differently. But it's like, okay, we can do this with our food. People are shocked because they see this on international kitchens. But they're like, Nigerian food can do this too, okay.
Have you guys seen some videos where they will roll the eba into a roll? And they will have 2 strips of egusi and the region. I'm like, I mean, come on. Isn't this a bit extreme?
This is something I wanted to highlight.
Exactly.
I think there's a balance between presentation and honouring the ingredient. And when it comes to our soup dishes, there is a reason why we have the quantity and the ratio of soup to swallow. So when I do see this,
so you remember that one about the petal eba and 2 strips?
It angers my core because I'm a very creative person. I believe in my plating, and I do take a lot of time with my presentation because the eye eats first, in my opinion. But I also want the people to look at the dish and identify the ingredients and see how I've honored it in a visually pleasing way. One of my favorite, most well presented dishes in Nigerian cuisine is amala, with the ewedu, the bakery, the stew. The colors are beautiful.
Okay, so colors play a major role in presentation as well.
And that's a dish that we created on our own without having to look at French croissants to make a roll out of eba. I don't think
so you do agree that some presentations are too artistic and are not realistic?
For me, I would say, what is the reason you are doing it? Why are you presenting? There's always a why that you have to answer.
There's a philosophy.
You don't just do anything for doing sake. And even if I have a garnish or an oil or a drizzle of something, it's still going to play a part in the dish and how you taste it. I don't put anything on my plate just because.
So that's what I'm saying. So some presentations are not realistic.
No.
Because you wouldn't understand. You wouldn't really appreciate the taste in the food because if you put a tiny blob or something where you need.
Yes, to us foreigners, we know that it's not practical. But to us Nigerians, we know that 2 strips of egusi, it's not enough. It's not enough. But to the eye of a foreigner, it just looks pleasant.
But it's funny you say that because we do the same thing in Nigeria when it comes to foreign food, right? In terms of the way we plate and the way we approach it. A foreigner will look at it like me, I'm an Italian chef. I think Italian food in Lagos is quarter to inedible. In terms of
how do they present it that is not well represented?
There's so many different rules and regulations that you need to understand culturally. So for example, in Italian cooking, if you're making a pasta dish, you're not going to put an entire piece of chicken on top because it's not practical. You're not supposed to cut pasta. So already when you see that already shows you that. So it's the same thing. So I think, once again, we're going back to the educational process. Okay. I think before you approach a cuisine, you have to understand the nuances of the cuisine.
Thank you so much.
And the tradition is always something that you have to pay
Thank you so
much
much, guys. I wish we had all day to, discuss this issue because, I hope I can take this home and really, really enjoy it. Take the jacket off and really, But thank you so much for being with us. Banke Makinde. Thank you, Vanessa Agili. Thank you, Benedict Okuzu. You are the greater tomorrows when it comes to the culinary industry, and I look forward to sampling your dishes more in future. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Chef.